This week, Kamala Harris defied the centrist opinion formers and the big money donors and picked the more progressive Minnesota Governor Tim Walz as her running mate instead of the guy who was the favorite for the VP slot, the more centrist Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro. The party has since united around her pick. Governor Walz has earned the praise of everyone from Barack Obama to Nancy Pelosi to AOC to Bernie Sanders. Harris, meanwhile, is filling out packed arenas with cheering crowds while Donald Trump does phone interviews with Fox. Quite the contrast. One poll this week from NPR gave the vice president a 3-point lead over Trump nationally and a 9-point lead with independents. So, are the Democrats now on course to victory in November? And what is the best way to defeat a political party as extreme and as shameless as the modern GOP? Who better to ask than my friend Brian Tyler Cohen, the hugely successful progressive podcaster and YouTube star, host of No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen, and an MSNBC contributor. His new book is appropriately entitled Shameless Republicans, Deliberate Dysfunction, and the Battle to Preserve Democracy. And Brian joins me now. Brian, congratulations on the book. Welcome to Mehdi Unfiltered.
Mehdi, thank you so much for having me.
Brian, were you Team Shapiro or Team Walz? What did you make of the Kamala Harris pick?
Look, I actually, this was one moment where I was just sitting back as an observer and just waiting for her to do what she does, which is, surprisingly right now, as a Democrat, waiting for everything to go wrong at every turn. I think that she has run a remarkably well-oiled machine of a campaign, and I've been very impressed thus far. And it was nice to just kind of sit as an observer and wait to see what happens. And I think that she absolutely chose the right choice. This is the first time where I think we've seen not just momentary unity, but prolonged unity in a party that is just always so steeped in chaos and dysfunction, oftentimes of their own making, as I'm sure you can attest to.
Let's take a step back, Brian. Forget picking Walz. What do you make of the way in which Kamala Harris took over this campaign from Joe Biden, gave it new energy and momentum, and is now packing out festival-style rallies across the country? A lot of people attacked me at the start of July when I said Joe Biden should step aside for Kamala Harris because they said it would be chaos. She wouldn't have a chance against Trump. It's been anything but chaos. Were you surprised to see the Democrats in array?
I'm always surprised to see Democrats in array. I've been a Democrat long enough that like any momentary semblance of something good happening for Democrats, you're just waiting for it to end. No, look, I think there was a massive hunger for somebody who could prosecute this case against Donald Trump for a second term. He is the worst presidential candidate we've had in American history, and the fact that we weren't able to do that with Joe Biden, for as wonderful a president as he's been, as progressive a president as he's been, which is something that you've spoken about, he is not a good candidate. And when Kamala Harris was able to come in and do the prosecutor versus felon framing, the champion for reproductive rights versus opponent of reproductive rights framing, what a sigh of relief the entire country breathed there, because without somebody like her who's able to prosecute this case against him, look, it's not to say that Joe Biden isn't doing a good job as president, but the fact is that if he can't make that case to the American people, what does it matter?
Yes, and you're right. I have called him a very progressive president compared to the people who came before him on domestic policy since October the 7th. I've been very critical of him on foreign policy. I'm hoping we're going to see a reset from Kamala Harris. She did meet with the uncommitted folks in Michigan this week. But then in the rally, some other protesters heckled her, and some people praised her shutting down of their heckling. I think she could have been a little bit more empathetic and less confrontational, but, we can all be critics. Let me ask you this. You have a new book out. I do want to talk about Republicans, because you and I could talk about Democrats forever. Yeah. You have a new book out called Shameless Republicans, Deliberate Dysfunction, and the Battle to Preserve Democracy. It's out in a few days. What is the case that you are making in the book? Spell it out to our viewers.
The case is that Republicans are not who they have claimed to be in terms of their historical branding. They have claimed to be the party of the Constitution, of law and order, of states' rights, of fiscal responsibility, of family values. That is the branding they give them. That's the glossy veneer they put on top of themselves to give themselves cover to act in a way that's completely antithetical to that. And the media, the both sides media, for so long has helped them do that, has helped them perpetuate this farce. And I think exposing the reality of the situation that we're living in and breaking breaking Americans away from this idea that Republicans are pro-Constitution or pro-family values, pro-states' rights, and giving a better sense of the reality of who they actually are will kind of pry them away from the spell that Republicans have put on them. And so I talk a lot about that to kind of expose the reality of who they are, but also how Democrats can rebalance the political landscape by not imbuing so much power in the media, for example, who continues to kowtow to the right, to make them their assignment editors, to give them the benefit of the doubt while they game the refs at the same time.
Yeah, I want to come back to the media in a moment, but it's interesting you talked about the hypocrisy or the con that the Republicans have done in presenting themselves as the party of constitution, of freedom, of family values. I would say of law and order, while they run a candidate who's a convicted felon and incited a riot. You start the book by reminding the reader about that night last year, January 2023, when Kevin McCarthy finally became Speaker after 15 rounds of voting, and Republican Congressman Mike Rogers of Alabama goes up to Republican Congressman Matt Gaetz of Florida, and they almost come to blows. We almost had a fist fight on the House floor. And yet it feels like ancient history. No one talks about it because there's been so much GOP craziness since. And you say in the book that we have become numb to the GOP's extremism and craziness. How do we stop being numb, Brian?
I think we don't allow them to normalize this, and we continue to remind people that what they're doing is not normal and that we shouldn't normalize it, and that government doesn't have to be filled with chaos agents, and we don't have to become used to the dysfunction, and that in fact government can and should work for people, and it's not just there to basically bolster the social media brands of the people who come in, like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Matt Gaetz and the rest of these people. That is right now the incentive structure for Republicans, but our job in the media, our job as activists, our job as just Americans is to remind people that what's happening isn't normal and that there is a better way, and that we should continue to push for progressive reforms at every angle and not basically relent or cede all of this ground to the right or give up and allow them to just convince everybody that the government can't work and that, give them free rein for oligarchs to come in and just completely own the government, which for Project 2025 is exactly what would happen.
You spent a lot of time, Brian, covering this story, covering the GOP. You've written this book. In your view, what is driving the people at the top of the Republican Party right now? Is it a fear of Donald Trump and his mob-like rule of the GOP, that if they step out of line, he'll come for them? Is it a belief that actually he's a clownish puppet who they can just control to get their tax cuts and deregulation done, and he can be a racist, that doesn't bother them? Or is it worse than all of that? Is it that they all now believe this stuff, the white supremacy, the conspiracy theories, the authoritarianism, they're all in?
You know the answer is D, all of the above. So for different people, it's different things. I think for the people who've bought into this whole idea, that is a lot of the Republican base. They've been able to con them into believing that they're voting for a populist party. When Donald Trump was in power, the only thing he did with his political capital was to pass a tax cut that overwhelmingly favored millionaires and billionaires. How does that help Donald Trump's people? How does it help them when he passes budgets that would cut Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security while going out in the campaign trail and beating his chest about how he's going to protect earned benefits? It doesn't. In terms of him being a puppet, look at J.D. Vance. He is backed by the Peter Thiels of the world. You think that they care about Donald Trump and his culture wars? They want to insert somebody into office through J.D. Vance who will do their bidding. And we all know what their views are in terms of their focus on consolidating power for themselves and also just becoming this new Christo-fascist oligarchy of America right now. And in terms of the people who are scared of Donald Trump, and that's the rest of the Republican Party. That is these people who I would include J.D. Vance himself in, because he knows exactly who Donald Trump is. He himself called him America's Hitler. We have the Elise Stefanik's of the world, these people who so shamelessly recognize the true nature, the true character of Donald Trump, and yet they are so focused on keeping their jobs that they will do and say anything that they have to. They will kiss the ring to any degree. Nikki Haley, who even used those exact words, to curry favor with him because they're scared of losing their jobs. It is, to use the title of the book, the peak of shamelessness.
You mentioned J.D. Vance, Brian. Have you ever come across a politician as uncomfortable in his own skin as J.D. Vance? He was asked this week, why don't you smile more? And he got angry at the reporter. I mean, he makes Ron DeSantis look good, and that's high praise.
Yeah, it is true. It's like JD Vance's first day as a human here. It's almost remarkable. It's almost impressive how they can keep finding people like Ron DeSantis and JD Vance who are just so bizarre as human beings, which is to say nothing of their lack of skills as politicians. But I think that's what you get when you have a party that is so steeped in demagoguery. I mean, inherently, you're not going to get normal people. If somebody's going to sign on to the Trump agenda and advocate for, the doom and gloom and American carnage that Trump sells, that's going to be a certain type of person that you have to bring forward. But they have a vested interest in making sure that they continue to perpetuate the demagoguery, that they continue to run on fear. They can't run on hope. They can't acknowledge that America is ever doing well because that would be completely antithetical to what Republicans are selling. Their brand is to make sure that people are afraid. Their overwhelmingly older white base is afraid of brown people, of immigrants, of gay people, of trans people. That is what all of this is based on. And so inherently, you have to have a certain tack when you're running these people. And JD Vance has shown that he's capable of doing that.
Brian, let's talk about the media. What pisses you off most about media coverage of the 2024 election right now? I mean, there's a lot to get pissed off about, and you lay it out very clearly in the book. And I should say, full disclaimer, you interviewed me for the book. I'm quoted in the book, talking about how much media coverage of Trumpism and the MAGA GOP infuriates me. What right now is top of mind when you're annoyed at media coverage of Trump v. Harris or Vance v. Walz or the Republican Party as a whole?
Well, you've been extraordinarily helpful in terms of the book, and you're heavily featured in it. So, for folks who are watching right now, if not just for me to hear more from Mehdi,
Good pitch.
I think the thing that bothers me the most is not just the both sidesism that we saw in the lead up to Trump, in the beginning of the Trump years. That is almost permissible. It's almost you can almost wave it off. The fact that it continues to this day, where for every time you say something insane, they talk about it, something insane that Donald Trump did, they feel like they still to this moment have to equate it with something a Democrat did. And that continues. And the thing is, the media has a vested interest in this. They are on the same plane that we're on. And what would happen if Donald Trump comes into office and does what he promised, which is to be a dictator for the day, to terminate the Constitution? What would happen to the free press? What typically happens to the free press in democracies when they, slide toward autocracy? Is the free press safe? Do they continue to exist in the form that they existed in before? And so they're on the plane with all of us. So if this plane goes down, what do they think is going to happen to them? And yet they feel this obligation somehow to continue on as these neutral observers that have no skin in the game when they do.
They 100% have skin in the game and should acknowledge that. What are you most worried about, Brian, as November and Election Day fast approaches?
I'm worried that my worry is that we will lose out to the couch for so much of the population, and that people will take for granted the fact that our democracy is not a given, that we have to continuously work for it, that yes, even though 2020 was the most important election of our lifetimes, even though to a large degree 2022 was the most important election of our lifetimes, that 2024 will also be the most important election of our lifetimes, and that democracy we have to continuously participate in it for it to actually work, and that it's not just a one-off, and that our job is never done. And the quicker that people understand that, the better off we'll be in terms of recognizing that we have to turn out every single time. And yes, that means getting up off the couch and going out to vote in November, and not just recognizing that, oh, we did this once and look how bad of a position we're in now. Yes, we're in a bad position, but please know that it could be worse, and that we have agency here, and that we have the power right now in this rare moment where we can dictate the course of where this country goes, that we can actually save it.
I'm impressed, Brian. So many mentions of couch and no reference to JD Vance. Well done.
That's right.
Last question. I launched Zeteo a few months ago, as you know. You're one of the people who inspired me. You've been hugely successful on YouTube as an independent, progressive, liberal voice. You have a huge platform. The president invites you to the White House for interviews. You've got a new book out. Congratulations. You just crossed 3 million subscribers, I believe, on YouTube. Congratulations for that, too.
Thank you.
Tell us this. Why is independent, non-corporate, non-mainstream media so important right now, especially on the left?
I think I'm going to draw it to something that we're seeing right now. I think people are desperate for authenticity. I think that's in huge part what you bring with Zeteo, and the success of Zeteo is a testament to exactly that. And what we're seeing from corporate media, again, to the earlier point we were speaking out, this both sides framing, people see through it. And we're in a moment right now where, okay, maybe we could have, waved it off during the Clinton years, or just earlier than that. But we are in a moment right now where this is existential for our democracy, and they are not meeting the moment. And so people are just desperate for something where we can have authentic voices out there who are just telling it like it actually is, instead of feeling like you have to kind of kowtow to both sides so that you maintain access to them. I'm not going to get any Republicans on my show. I know I'm in the same boat as you. I know it's like, I know nobody's signing up to go talk to Mehdi Hassan. So that's just how it is, and that's fine. I don't give a shit, frankly, because I know that I can continue to give the message that I think is important to the people who tune in to my episodes on a daily basis, and that's the only thing that's important to me. I answer to nobody, and that's how it's going to stay.
That's how it should stay. Brian Tyler Cohen, thank you so much for joining me on the show today. Brian's book is called Shameless Republicans, Deliberate Dysfunction, and the Battle to Preserve Democracy. You can pre-order it now. Congratulations, Brian. Thank you.
Mehdi, thank you so much.